as a marketer, one of my frustrations was you would put out experiments, you would put out ideas, you would put out campaigns, and then you would need to rely, after you put that out, either on a lot of analysis on Excel or a team of data scientists to tell you what worked, what didn't work, what the deep insights are. Imagine you could get all of this insight using natural language from your platform of choice. Wouldn't that be powerful? That's what an analyst agent does. Replicate the job of a marketing analyst.
Hi, I'm Greg Stewart, CEO of MMA Global, the international nonprofit trade association for CMOs who are focused on architecting a new future of marketing.
I'm Rex Briggs, an author, market researcher, measurement inventor, and entrepreneur.
Hey, Rex, you and I have talked a lot about how, AI is such a big deal for marketers to really help turn them into generalists in some way, right? That they can really work to, instead of all this sort of splinter roles, does it make everybody kind of an expert? Does it make everybody, extra smart? And it really feels like AI is going to start to break down some of those silos, right?
I think so. I mean, what we've seen over the last 20 years is a increased fragmentation in marketers' roles, right? You've got the growth hacker who's really specialized in this one specific channel of how to get the most out of TikTok or Snap, and it's a different person who's the expert to do the same thing on Snap. And you've got someone who's the radio expert, and then someone who's the audio streaming, and that's different from the podcast expert. So you've got this massive amount of splintering that's happened in the last 2 decades because of the fragmentation of marketing. And I think our guest today might talk about how we are able to give that type of expertise to individuals because the AI agent can bring that expertise. So it should be a pretty interesting trend.
Yeah, listen, somebody's got to do this for everybody and sort of get it organized. I did hear the best thing. I was talking to this is not related to marketing, but was a group of professors the other day, and a guy pointed out that let me see if I remember how to say it. He goes, the dumbest doctor in 5 years will be smarter than the smartest doctor today.
Yeah,
and I think the point is that, right, all this information is going to be kind of at your fingertips, and certainly diagnostics. That's off. I mean, probably some examples there. But I think, it's just somebody who's really thought through what it means to be a super marketer, right? Those who can do the jobs of many and bring all that information and access and hopefully, Rex, I mean, where the MMA goes, like, a sense of clarity about how marketing really works and not the kind of bullshit that people get into and just making stuff up, which is kind of the whole thesis of the MMA. But
yeah,
I don't know. Well, I mean, it's all going to be done to help agents, right? Yeah.
Well, and imagine if you can just pull that expertise like a package off a shelf in a supermarket, right? I mean, that becomes a whole different way of being able to assemble the type of expertise that you need. And you can get back to being more of the Renaissance person, the generalist, the expert, the manager of these expert agents. And I think our guest today is here to explain how that might work. We've got Sandeep Menon. He's co-founder of Auxia, and he joins us now. Hello.
Hi, Rex. Thank you. Hey, Greg. Great to chat to the two of you.
Yeah, really excited to do this, Sandeep. I mean, because like I said, I think you're really starting to think all this stuff through this next. So listen, first off, your point is that there's going to be super marketers, although my note says supermarket, so I think that maybe is wrong. But there's going to be super marketers and that marketing jobs are converging thanks to AI. So just give us more information about the thesis, how you came at it. And by the way, those of you who look up Sandeep, I mean, you got a long history of having done marketing at some of the big tech companies. So.
Yeah, that's right, Greg. And look, I think you kind of touched upon it when you mentioned that the roles are converging, and your idea of like the dumbest doctor today being like in 5 years from now smarter than what somebody is right now. And it all comes down to the amount of information that you have at your fingertips, right? And what power you have. I do feel that the biggest role that AI is doing right now is one of role compression, right? So what we see across industries is that as you have a set of smarter agents or assistants assisting you in doing stuff that required multiple people, you are able to do much more. The product manager of today is able to do much more. Product manager of tomorrow will be able to do much more. To your point, the doctor of today is doing X, doctor of tomorrow will be able to do much more. And that is exactly our thesis around marketers. We believe that a lot of disparate functions that marketing teams either need multiple people to do, or more importantly, multiple functions to do that are outside their immediate scope, they should be able to kind of do that with the help of AI agents tomorrow. That means that the marketer of tomorrow is much more strategic and focused on higher value actions, as you pointed out.
So in practice, how are you seeing that play out? Can you give a couple examples of companies that are using some of your agents today to become that, manager of a network of agents that have deeper expertise in specific topics?
Yes, Rex, I can give 2 examples. Number one use case that I talk about is if you think about what marketers do, especially on the lifecycle side today, is they set up a system of rules, right? For example, let's say you have an app now for a retailer. What a lifecycle marketer does is to encourage you to kind of build loyalty towards you and drive, future purchases, etc. Essentially, what they do currently is to set up a system of rules, which is like, hey, if Rex comes in and he belongs to this broad segment, I think we should send him this email. And if he responds to that, then probably I will send him this promotion. If he doesn't, I'll send him a notification. These are all discrete rules that you set up, and beyond a certain extent, it's very difficult for marketers to maintain all of these arcane rules. So today, what they do is that they work with a decision agent. And what the decision agent is able to do is it'll look at all of the data that you have about the customer and then determine what is the right action to promote to that user at a particular point in time to get them to the objective function that you're trying to optimize for. That's a good example of an agent that we use and is currently deployed at some of our customers. A second example is one of analysts. As a marketer, one of my frustrations was you would put out experiments, you would put out ideas, you would put out campaigns, and then you would need to rely, after you put that out, either on a lot of analysis on Excel or a team of data scientists to tell you what worked, what didn't work, what the deep insights are. Imagine you could get all of this insight using natural language from your platform of choice. Wouldn't that be powerful? That's what an analyst agent does. Replicate the job of a marketing analyst.
It does feel, though, a little. Listen, we've all seen how much AI can hallucinate and sort of fill in the gaps, which is, let's be clear, that's not a flaw. That's how the system was designed. People forget that that's what generative AI means. It does feel funny, though. I guess the question I've always wondered, Sandeep, and I'm not the technologist. Rex is more that. How would I have confidence that it's making the right decisions for me? How do I know, or how do you build the systems that then don't create the challenges later that it's either making stuff up or getting it totally wrong and that I as a marketer might not know?
100%. This is going to be a key aspect of the systems of the future, right? Like you are moving away from, to your point, deterministic rules-based systems where you have specific rules for each scenarios to more of a probabilistic decision making. And the 2 things that I think are critical for systems of these like these to kind of function are, number one, the ability to kind of have control to the marketer. And the way we provide that and way systems like ours provide it is by having really good guardrails. So the job of the marketer would be to determine what your strategies are, define really good guardrails, and then the third aspect of it, once you have the goals, the guardrail set, is the explainability, right? Like you should have the ability, the transparency to go back and understand why a specific decision was taken if required and learn from it. If you don't have the transparency and controls, I do think that marketers of the future will not be happy with the system that you have.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. And the explainable AI part is incredibly important, and it becomes difficult because I think what you've described, especially in the first one, is a journey mapping agent that instead of having these journey maps that are driven by a handful of personas, you're basically saying, look, normally what happens is a company goes through and says, what's my ideal consumer profile, my ICP,
Yes.
Do I have different personas? And they might say, oh, we got a Greg Stewart persona. He's a hard-driving New York CEO, one who wants this. And then we've got, a Rex persona. He's more of a researcher and is more methodical and thoughtful, but maybe not as hard-driven as Greg and wants this kind of data. He
what
wants
about
to
the
see the math.
easy going from California part two? Mention that, yeah. Versus New
That'd
York
be our
City,
producer, maybe Mary. You got her persona, but you've got these different personas, and they've got different paths, a little bit different paths, and a little bit different content. And what you're doing is you're like multiplying that by every individual person, because now the AI agent can serve individual people and come up with its own path, potentially adjusting the content that they're seeing and so forth. I mean that's a big jump ahead. In theory, that becomes that personalized one-to-one marketing that we've been talking about since Peppers and Rogers came out with their book,
Yes.
right? Am I getting it right? Is it that big of an
100%.
explosion? Okay, wow.
It is, Rex. And look, I grew up in a small town in India. To your point about like personas, right? So it's a small town. Everybody knew everybody. And when my dad would walk to the local branch, the banker would know him because there's only so many people. He would know his bank account. He would know what he's doing, and then he would say, "Hey, your son is going to college. Maybe you should get a loan." So look, that is what it was like in small communities, and this is what human beings crave. You are able to provide hyper-personalized one-to-one experiences. I think digital is fantastic. What we have had over the last 15, 20 years with the internet is one-to-many. Now, I do think we have an ability now to kind of do one-to-one at a large scale. And that's what this current wave is all about.
Yeah, I think the hard question about that is what's the control group for that? How do I know
Yeah.
that worked? How are you thinking about that?
So
the baseline or the control or the untreated?
yeah, and this is again where I do think system design is very important. At least in our system, the way we do it is that you always have a global control. And it's not enough having a global control. What is really, really important is also how you mark your counterfactual. And let me explain that, right? So let's say that Rex and Greg are similar personas. We know they are not, but let's assume for a moment that they're similar personas. And we want to kind of show something to Rex, and Greg is in the control. What we do is that we identify that for a person like Rex, Greg is the counterfactual. We mark that Greg should have seen this, but is not seeing it. And then we measure the difference between Greg and Rex. So having that level of granular counterfactual marking is very, very important for A, delivering these hyper-personalized experience, and B, for the agents to kind of improve and get to the state that we are looking for.
So you're creating like a global mean of all the different personas to get that counterfactual, because I guess any one person comparison would be
Very
fraught. But yeah,
exactly, right. So the way we do it is that you have a global control, and then to your point, you have all of these guardrails or what we call qualifying criteria, right? So let's think about a simple campaign, and let's say that we are showing something to you on the homepage of your app. What we do is that for the qualifying criteria that the marketer has defined, we look at within the control group who's the eligible audience who could have received the same thing but did not, and mark a counterfactual there.
Oh, okay. So it's the unexposed counterfactual. Gotcha. Okay.
That's right.
So Sandeep, I've seen some of these companies who have talked about having agents for marketers and so on. They've kind of gone down the path of creating actually personas of employees. Like here's our social media expert named Jane, or here's our other. Are you going down? I mean, listen. Are you going down that path? Do you think that sort of there need to be sort of different agents, I guess, that have different expertises? Like I would hire people, or an equally good question is, where do you think are some of the marketing applications that a marketer should start to think of first and foremost? Like, is you have a checklist of the things that you could provide to make marketing better today. What's that stack rank list of marketing capabilities you'd go after, or marketing executions, or I don't know. Approach the question any way you want. I just want to understand, like, how do you step into this thing? Where do you go first?
Yeah. See, I honestly believe that, and this happens with every technical revolution, right? Like there is a lot of effort to force fit into the personas of the past, right?
That's why I gave you the opt out to not go down that path. Exactly. Yeah. So something there, but help connect that bit for us. Right. But you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I kind of think about like, what is it? Like, ultimately, what is the role of a marketer? In my opinion, it is to make sure that we provide delightful and relevant experiences to the end users of our products, while at the same time driving the business metrics that you have, right? So we kind of think about the solutions that we develop in that order, right? So which is why, means I do believe that some mechanism of understanding a user deeply and then providing a hyper-personalized experience is the first area that we wanted to kind of tackle on, and I think it's important.
Okay, so what next best communication, content, ad, whatever that we should serve to that consumer? That's what you think is the...
Yeah, that and the way I think about it is like, what is it? We talked about 1:1 truly, like as we are speaking. If you want to kind of have this level of experience interaction, you need two things. Number one, you need the ability to understand the other person at a very deep level, not as segment. Nobody wants to be treated as broad segments. So what we are trying to get to is like, can we have a deeper understanding of the end customer that you're talking to? Specifically, our area of focus, which I believe is a huge focus for a lot of marketers, is how do I unlock all of the first-party data that I have, right? So if you think about where the real innovation was in marketing in the last 15 years, I would say it's in programmatic ads, right? Like the ability for a marketer to say, hey, I want to kind of get this amount of traffic for this amount of money. You kind of assign a budget and you get traffic. But what happens after that is equally, if not more important, which is how do you kind of activate, engage, retain, monetize users? And that's an area where I feel that this current wave or this current movement around AI has real potential.
Okay, yeah, but what's the AI? What's the decisions that it's making? So, listen, I don't know if we're loading in a group of emails. If you're doing B2B, if we're doing consumer here, sometimes we know the consumer, sometimes we don't. We have to put them in cohorts. Sometimes there's groups. So first off, how are you identifying who you're going after? How's the AI? Are you doing that? Then I get a sense of goals. Then is your system set up such that it's deciding, okay, well, let's serve a display ad here through programmatic, or let's send an email here, or let's send a text message. I mean, I don't know, how's it making some of that decision? And if I'm bound by what we do now, then feel free to take me out of that. But how's it doing that? Yeah.
Yeah. So first of all, I want to kind of be very clear about our focus. Our focus is what happens after you have a prospect or a customer on any of your digital surfaces. So we are not responsible for the ad side at this point.
Okay.
In time, right?
Okay. So they've come to the website, they filled out a form, maybe,
yes,
for example.
Maybe. Okay. Or like your email use case is really valid. Like you have a relationship with that user and you want to kind of continue that. So at a very simplistic level, we are doing two things. We are shifting from what most of marketing is, which is a campaign-centric approach, to more of a user-centric approach. What do I mean by that? At any point in time, let's say you come to your example of like, I'm on a website or I logged into an app. What we are looking is for this particular user, Greg has come in at this point in time. What is the right next best action that I want to promote to Greg to get them to the eventual end state? And once you determine what that action is, then from a list of all of the creative that we have set to kind of drive that action, which is the most pertinent creative that I want to show to Greg to get him to take that action.
Okay, but that sounds like a notification. That sounds like, so you're doing, in-app notifications to the consumer based on boosting performance.
Yeah, it could be a notification, but very often what we see, the most powerful thing is actually in-app experiences. Mm-hmm. You have any real estate that you can have on your app, your website, can be turned to be dynamic, right? So if you think about most websites, you have like all of various sections within it. Some of it are core product experiences. Others are more to kind of encourage users to take specific actions.
So when you're unpacking that, what's your ideal type of customer today? Is it financial services or someone that's not regulated because of the challenges with regulated part? How do you think about that?
Yeah, so ultimately means like we believe that a solution like this should work for all use cases, but at this point in time, we are seeing a lot of traction in three verticals. Number one is is retail marketplace. A lot of first-party data, and many marketers they struggle with what I call the reacquisition problem, which is that in order for me to kind of engage with an existing customer of mine again, I need to go and spend money on ads again to kind of on Instagram to kind of bring them back, right? Like, so I think there's a lot of opportunity to use the rich first-party data to kind of drive better decisions. Second is media technology. We work with a couple of software businesses and increasingly newspapers, where again you have large set of audiences, a lot of data. How do you kind of leverage that to kind of determine what is the right experience to show to take them? And we also do work with banks, right? So it's again a use case where, to my earlier point, there are so many rules set up that marketers really allow the opportunity to kind of set objectives and then experiment at scale.
Yeah, the reason why I was asking is I was thinking about categories where this would work best would be ones where you have a lot of first-party data.
Yes.
You have some natural emotion where the consumer wants to stay engaged with you on a periodic basis, either a retailer buying something or a financial institution, or as you said, a news media type of company, and that you could differentially deliver content so that there was a personalized experience, right? Those seem to be the key ingredients that you're going after.
I couldn't have said it better than you did, Rex. We need to get you to do some of our positioning.
So the question then is just as a follow-up then is that it seems like your objective function would be something like around LTV or some type of measure of incremental engagement. Tell me a little bit about how you think about that part, because the AI just becomes really good at whatever you tell it to do, but it sometimes can be a blind spot if we're not thinking about the big picture. How have you solved for that?
Yes. And Greg, do you want to add a question as well to that? Or?
No, go ahead and answer that one. I think I have the same kind of question. Like, I think companies do this. Back to Rex's point about the regulatory thing. I mean, they do rules because attorneys can look at rules and they're hard and fast. Whether they're right for the consumer or not, nobody gives a shit. It seems. That's kind of the problem with that. But at least it sort of allows them control. But yeah, go ahead. Go after that one.
So let me start with Rex's point, and I'll get back to like the auditability aspect, which is very important in certain industries. So Rex, in an idealized state, you're absolutely right. Like you need to set the deepest end state objective, right? Like, and I want to kind of say, hey, I want to improve lifetime value. That's the metric that I can set. And we have some customers that do that, but from our experience, what we are finding out, this is more on a practical based on what works, is that at least early on for these agents to do their work, it is better to set mid-funnel objectives than deep end of the funnel objectives. Because if you can set end of funnel objectives, but the confounding variables are so many, and it'll take a long time for these agents to kind of learn and do. So increasingly, what we are requesting our customers to do, and where they're seeing value, is rather than go for the end state, try to look at what are the mid funnel actions that are predictive of that end state, and then slowly from there learn and move towards the objective function that you're looking for.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Sandeep, why is this so bad today, though? I mean, listen, Rex knows where I'm about to go. It's about chatbots. Yeah. So, and I'm not talking about OpenAI's chatbot. I hate chat. I mean, I have not interacted with a company through a chatbot that has ever been positive, that doesn't just end up irritating more than anything in the world. So why suddenly... if you can explain why that system's not been fixed. I mean, if we don't do it right then what makes us think that we're going to start delivering ads in a way that makes consumers satisfied? Because what you're talking about is notifications. So if it's just notifications, it's pretty easy just to just ignore them, right? Or hit stop eventually or something like that. So I don't know. I'm having trouble knowing that it really is going to work in a way that we kind of envision the future.
Yeah, but Greg, before Sandeep answers, the big question is you're not competing for perfect. You're competing against what exists today. What's your next best alternative?
My second question is going to be, has he researched that? Would be my second one, which is a variation where you were kind of going, Rex, before. But I wanted to understand, how does the system work that we think is going to be better? Why do we have reason to believe it's going to be better? And then
I want to kind of start with your point on the chatbots. There was a very interesting article recently by an early Google product manager who's a VC now, and he talks about this concept of horseless carriages. And his point is that when cars first came out, they were designed like horseless carriages. They looked like horseless carriages. And he thinks that most AI UI right now are horseless carriages. And to prove the point, you can look at the first old Yahoo website from mid-90s or the first mobile apps that we used to have, right? And if you look at it right now, they look pretty lame, but and not very functional. And so I do this is just to kind of reiterate the point you said. I don't think, at least I personally don't think, that chat as a mode is going to be the standard UI for the AI of the future. I think we've just started with that. We are very similar to where we were in 1995 with early Yahoo directories, 2007, 2008, where early mobile websites, first apps coming out. And we are yet to see kind of the core second order effects of what this could be, right? I don't, for one, want to kind of predict how that would be, but I don't think it's like if the only thing we're going to get is slightly smarter chatbots, I think then we are definitely not fulfilling the promise of AI.
Well, but I do think, though, listen, so, okay, I hear what you're saying, and I'm not just, I'm not looking to have a better chatbot, which is your variation of I'm really looking to just have a conversation with a person who knows what the hell they're talking about and is empowered to actually do something. So given companies have done such a terrible job with customer service when people are involved, is this system really going to be better?
So, look, it comes down to what constraints are, and specifically the example that you're talking about, right? And we can transport that into the marketing function as well. I want to kind of begin by saying that the customer service, where you have, again, a bunch of companies building agents for that space, is not my area of expertise. But if you think fundamentally what the challenge there was, most companies did not think about customer service as a value function. It was a cost function, right? It was always that, hey, this is like every interaction that I am having a human do with Greg, that costs me money. So my objective is to make sure that Greg has as few interactions as possible.
Yes.
If you set that as the design function, then you want to give crappy experiences, because if you give delightful experiences, Greg is going to come back and demand more, right?
Oh, you're right. So they've done a really good job, in other words, is what you're saying.
They have done a phenomenal, especially the airlines.
I'm having a little trouble. I'm having a little trouble buying that reflect on the last experience I had, but keep going, right?
Yes. So I do believe that if you can solve for, if you can change that perspective of it being a cost function to more of a value function, then interesting things happen. And especially if you can do it where specific, again, we are far away from this end state, but if the agent that you interact with has a deeper understanding of your experience with that, right, and your context, I do believe that they will be more empowered and better suited to give responses. And again, drawing parallel to what we are talking about marketing, part of the reason why marketers do notifications is a good example. It was a very interesting concept when it came out, but right now both notifications and emails I do feel have become increasingly spammy. And I can't the amount of conversations I've had with lifecycle marketers where they were like, look, I think the best thing to do is to just send 3 emails a day, 7 days a week, 365 days, because if I have a control of sending lesser emails, then sending more emails always works. But you don't realize that is not a good comparison, right? The reason you're doing that is
we're teaching consumers to ignore future emails, right?
Exactly. So again, I do believe that once you have the ability, once you give marketers the powers to understand users better at a deeper level, you definitely can add more value. And that's also one of my pet peeves when it comes to Gen AI. A lot of the focus has been on what I would call wrappers that just create content. But again, as marketers, what you know is that content without context is useless, right? So which is again, when I spoke about some of the agents, I have stayed away from content. I do believe that content is a space again where if you have all of the good context, you can generate much better content, which is more suited for your use cases.
So Sandeep, building on that idea, how do you create a better mousetrap in your world? Because I think you've hit on the key point, which is we don't want the communications to feel spammy. And the point about email, for example, is that it's done because it still works. I mean, I bought a roller bag or backpack, and now I'm looking at the roller bag from the same company, and I'm getting emails weekly now. I'm kind of thinking maybe I should be buying one for my wife. I'm going back and forth, and I'll probably convert at some point, and they'll think, oh, wow, it's because we spammed them with emails. And they might actually be right. But what's the better user experience? Because I think the problem is that they don't get any signal back from me about what my needs are. And so with the absence of that data, they're just, all they're doing is, hey, I've got the name in the email, send out the next offer.
Yeah, Rex, in some regards, what Sandeep's doing here, I think, is very similar to what we've been doing in AI personalization, right? With this consortium for AI personalization that we've run, that you brought us that technology and insight, which is basically build cohorts, try to personalize ads, but we're not really doing anything sophisticated there. We're better, but not sophisticated.
No, and I think the part that's interesting about Sandeep, and the reason why I was asking the question that way I was asking it, is I'm interested in if you have these first-party data, because he's working in the world of more like retention marketing and loyalty marketing and the engagement.
Mm-hmm.
If you have more signals, could you decide when to engage somebody? Could you decide when to reach out? So instead of just blasting out the notifications, blasting out the emails, you're being really selective about, ooh, I think this person's retention risk just went up. Or, ooh, I think this person's probably coming into a point where they're going to need us again. So yeah, I'm just kind of exploring this idea with you, Sandeep. What do you think?
So Rex, first of all, I want to be clear, right? Like, notifications, emails, they are fantastic channels for marketers to communicate and drive a relationship with your users. So my point was not on emails. My point was on the volume of unsolicited email that you get. And nobody ever said that, hey, I got this really thoughtful email which adds a lot of value, my understanding of a product. I want less of that. The problem is that we don't get many of those. And I do think that, to the point that you mentioned, there is a real opportunity now for us to kind of give that experience, because you have the ability. This is where, like, one of the things that most enterprises have done a good job of in the last 5 to 7 years is that they have spent a humongous amount of effort in getting first-party data, in collecting and understanding their users. The challenges, and there's a McKinsey study, I think, that goes into this, challenges for most large enterprises, they are only scratching the surface when it comes to using all of this data that they have about you, about each individual consumer they have, in driving intelligent communication with them.
Yeah, there's a huge opportunity there, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's what we are trying to solve for, because I'm convinced that if you have the ability to kind of deeply understand a user and craft your communication around it, that's what marketing is all about, right? So this is to your point, and Greg, on your super marketer point, right? Like, that's what I believe gives marketers superpowers. It's like having that deep understanding of a user and crafting communication around that.
In practice, how hard is that to do? Because, to your point about the McKinsey study, I think the issue has a lot to do with that people have these fractured data lakes. They've got information all over the place. The power of doing some type of RAG or inference based upon this, large set of data for a consumer to decide to craft when to communicate with them and so forth. There's a lot for us to figure out there. Where do you start, and how do you get companies engaging? What's the first couple of steps?
Yeah. Again, great point. The first thing is that this is an area, again, I don't want to kind of just toot our horn, but this is the area that we have invested a lot in. This is an area why, after we left Google, we took more than a year and a half to build the core infra. It's like the big challenge that companies have, especially marketers, is that no company ever said that I have an army of data scientists and I'm happy with the amount of data scientists that I have to understand my data, right? So, and no company ever, and even the big tech companies that I'm familiar with, ever said that all of my data is in a perfect position, in a clean way, that I can make sense of it. Like, I don't think there's an enterprise or a company that
said no one, right?
Yes,
exactly.
Yes. Yeah. And so a lot of what we have invested in is the ability to connect to both structured, unstructured data, and often disparate data sources, and try to create signals at scale out of it. And that again is something which was not possible for you to do, for any company for that matter to do a few years back, because the foundational technology to do that did not exist.
So unpack that a little bit more and tell us more about, are you looking at things like, are you talking about, when you say foundational technology, you're talking about, the Databricks and Snowflakes of the world, making that data more accessible, or are you talking about something different?
No, absolutely. So the increasingly the Snowflakes, Databricks, the BigQueries of this world have ensured that almost all of the data that a company has is at least piped to a certain source. So you almost have kind of a single system of truth. Now the problem is that data is not often clean. You have maybe replications, etc. And that's where some of the new technological advances come in. The ability to kind of ingest all of that data, try to create signals at scale, both from structured but also unstructured data. Like, for example, we work with a customer where the decisioning we take is it's a media company, and what you show to a particular customer is also determined based on the articles they read, etc. Right? And now you can do that, right? Like, you can look at the entire content of the article, create a vector embedding out of it, and understand, okay, for somebody who reads this article, what could be the kind of content there, or the message that they might most resonate to. That was not possible earlier. That was not possible a few years back.
Well, Sandeep, let's get back to kind of the other point. So, do we know what's working better yet? Are you that far along in your journey? You've been able to do side-by-side research and sort of see performance. I'm assuming you're looking for business performance increase. I mean, Rex mentioned it as lifetime value. I don't know if that's a hard measure to do sometimes. So I don't want to hold you to that standard yet. But I don't know. Talk to me about what we know about this.
Yeah. So look, the two things that we have seen all of our early customers talk about is number one. This is very focused on business objectives, right? The typical business objectives where we have seen a lot of uplift. Number one is what I call early user onboarding. It's a common use case. You spend a lot of money. You have a new user coming in, new customer coming in, whether it's for a bank, for a language learning app, you name it, right? And then the first 5 to 7 days, in some cases even the first 30 days, on how they interact with your product or your business is critical in determining, to Rex's point, long-term lifetime value, stickiness, etc. So that's an area where I do believe that we have seen a lot of success in, right? So we've been able to show against your control clear uplift in terms of business metrics, right? So the second meta point, which is very, very important, is that if you were to, from my experience, if you were to look at the teams that are most effective in driving what I call quote unquote growth, it all comes down to one thing: speed of experimentation, right? So if you have the ability to experiment more and experiment at scale, you learn quicker. And that is what systems like these enable you to do. Like across the set of enterprise customers we worked with, that's one common theme that we hear. Hey, this is really, really turbocharged my experience with them. I was on a call before this, and the term she used is experimentation on steroids. So that is second thing that systems like this would enable you to do.
So I have to ask a question about about ease of use and how do you get people to adopt. And as you were telling the story about the first 7 days, it reminded me of what my experience was creating the first personalization for websites. And it was in your media space. It was actually for Wired, or their Hotwired website. Yeah. But this was 30 years ago. And there was a guy, Steve Silverman, he was the editor at large. Yes. And we had the segmentation of how the different, from different people that were interested in the news and afraid of being, last to know versus people who wanted to be first to know. People were interested in entertainment, and we could get the different content. He would then write a different paragraph for the opening to appeal to these different segments. And we saw uplift, and it was exactly as you said. In the first 1 week, we could determine what the value trajectory would be for the next 60 days, pretty accurately, in 90 days, pretty well. And so it really mattered a lot how we engage with people. When I left that company, though, I handed it over to a Harvard MBA I won't shame him. We'll
Or the
just say his
MBA.
name was John.
Yeah, I know where this
Or
is
the
going.
MBA.
Yeah, anytime you go ahead. Yeah.
Exactly. And it completely fell apart afterwards. And when I met him a few years later, I asked him what happened. He said it was just way too complicated. And granted, this was in the late 1990s and we had neural networks and they were complicated. But the execution of it, it was just like this idea that you would have, instead of having one email blast, which they called hot flash going out, versus having, potentially 9 different segments times, different use cases, 100 or so different versions that could come out. That was just too much for a Harvard MBA to manage. What makes this easier now, this version? How do you make it easy so that people can really execute and they don't get lost in the details and unable to handle this complexity?
Yeah. So, great question. Unfortunately, I don't have like a simple answer to this, right? So, this is I think we kind of alluded to this earlier. With every technology shift, right? Like the problem is, or the challenge is not just with the technology. The challenge is with change management.
Yeah.
And
The biggest problem with AI is humans, right?
yeah. So that's what we are also spending a lot of time on, right? So I think the change management challenge is often underestimated. One common stat that I which when I saw it for the first time, I was shocked by, is the move to cloud, right? So like AWS, the first versions of that came in like early 2010. So we have at least 15 years into that kind of moving to the cloud journey, but apparently only about 30 to 35% of all enterprise workload has moved to the cloud, right? So big shifts take time. My first job while I was working at Google was to convince small businesses to advertise on Google or use internet as a medium for acquiring customers. And I still remember some early conversations. They were like,
What year was that, Sandeep? What year?
this was 2007, right? So the big businesses had already started using internet, but like for most small businesses, they were like, look, I have a mom and pop shop, or I have this thing, like, why do I need to have a website, and why do I have to kind of spend
I
money?
run a full page newspaper ad on Sunday. It gets me all I need, right? Exactly. Right.
Yeah. So, and there were some people who made that transition, right? And they are successful, and others who didn't embrace the change and got affected by that, right? So I think we are in a similar moment. I don't think there's an easy answer in terms of how do we make this transition effective. I know that this is a change that is going to be transformative and will help marketers to embrace it. That's where I look at like this is what like MMA is used to spend a lot of time during the early days. I remember and like educating and talking about the importance of the change, right? So,
what do you think's different today? Let's take the business one from 2007 to now. I don't think there's a business that would go online today that would think that they don't need the internet and don't need social presence and all these other things that are now part of the equation. What do you think? How do we get AI to be at that same place where it's just assumed, of course, this is how you build a modern business?
Yeah. So the first mind shift which you're already seeing happening is when marketers and businesses think about AI more as a companion, right? So hey, this is a companion. This is my thought partner. It's not going to get everything right, but it definitely helps me be a better marketer, a better customer service agent. I think that is the first wave, right? So I also feel, to our point on UI, we talked about UI in terms of how we interact with AI, but there's also, for companies like us, we are spending increasingly a large amount of time in thinking about, hey, what is the best way in which we can bring this to life? Again, Greg, you're going to love this. Means when we first had our analyst agent, and even now, it is predominantly a chat-based mechanism for marketers to interact, right? But we are rethinking that, like, why chat? Like when I come, like what's, quote unquote, Larry Page always used to talk about this toothbrush test, right? Like, what is it that when I come back to the product, to our product, what are the best ways in which you can see what are the things of value and bring it to life, right? Like, rather than having to go and ask questions. And there's also interesting articles about how agents are evolving. I do think we are still in like what I would call step 2, which is where you ask questions, you are prompted, and agents come back. I think we are far away from, if you look the driverless car analogy, we are still in like level 2. whereas what we aspire for is more level 5.
Yeah. What do you think is your next step to get to close that gap?
Yeah, well, Sandy, can I twist Rex's same question? So let's be really fundamental here. What does a marketer do to get started? Like what would they do to go first here? I think that's what Rex's question was. So,
yeah, well
and
said.
by the way, because listen, I lived through I remember like the resistance to internet, the stupid things that people said at very senior executives in the late '90s. It was just idiotic. And I think people didn't really recognize mobile. It was hard to transition. Even Facebook struggled to get to mobile. And, like that was, and, Carolyn Everson used to come in the board meetings all the time and talk about how hard it was for Facebook. How do we expect Unilever to get there? Okay. Yeah. I don't think, though, today, right, Rex, right, there's enough pattern recognition. Nobody's resisting it. I don't know if they know what the hell to do to get going, though. And certainly to do it at scale. That's the bigger, like there's some pilots, but it's hard to do at scale. So I don't know. What do you advise? How? And by the way, you can make this about Auxia. I mean, that's fine. About what you're trying to offer. You make it very specific for that. It'd be good.
Yeah. So number one means, look, you're right that there is like nobody's resisting it upfront, but like nobody's resisting the concept that AI can be good for me. But there is definitely a resistance in like how am I ready to change the way I work, right? Like a common example I give is the shift from rules-based to what we are doing, right? So we talk with a lot of businesses. Typically, there's a lot of buy-in from senior management, but we do need to spend an inordinate amount of time to kind of get the marketing practitioner to stop doing what she or he is doing right now in setting rules, because there's a certain comfort in setting rules, there's a certain comfort in mapping out these journeys, and letting go of that is not easy. Specifically getting to your point about what is it that marketers can do to stay ahead, I think the wisdom from the earlier iterations really still stand out. Number one is this is something which we often tell our kids for ourselves. Like the thing that has most surprised me about the AI wave is that, like, we have seen, to your point, we have seen earlier technological shifts, but I am constantly amazed at the pace at which the shift is happening, and even how even experts are struggling to keep a pace with it, right? So
it's crazy what's going on right now. It does feel like the most insane. Yes, like hyper speed, whatever that is, right?
Yeah. Yes, and what gives me comfort is that we talk to, like, we have a few PhDs in our team, and even they say, "Oh my God, this is this is changing."
You need
so quickly.
an AI agent to keep up with the AI.
That's right. So,
but on coming back to the rules one, I think that you nailed it. So what have you found that's been successful in helping marketers understand? Hey, this isn't a rules based. This is inference, and this is, this. Yeah, how do you nudge people along or help coach them to do that? To change that mindset.
I don't think we have completely solved for it. This is a constant effort. This is as with every change, right? Like there's a lot of effort that you do need to put in an education, showing similar patterns on what worked, and showing example from other people who adopted this change. One of the things that I found, like which we now definitely do, is that in every enterprise that we talk to, there is one or two champions. So a lot of what we do is in identifying who that champion is, because there are a few people who are like, I see this coming, and it's just some people are innate ability to kind of want to learn and make that shift. So we try to find those folks, and they are quite effective, and then working with the rest of their team and getting them through these shifts.
Yeah, I think that there's something that we need to figure out, and it'll be good to work as an industry.
Absolutely.
That maybe it's like start with why. There's something like that needs to be some catchy idea that shifts people from starting from the pipeline that they normally start with, which is, they go through the what part and build things out, but they aren't really, somehow they lose sight of the path that AI would take them down, which is really, as you said, it's not rules-based. That's probably the most important hard thing for people to get their mind around, is that all the templates and all the things they have don't work the same in this new framework.
But what do I need to have ready to do this? I mean, listen, your examples, I'm going back to kind of your categories. So retail, I'm assuming that's mostly e-commerce as an experience, not per se retail in store, although maybe I'm wrong in what you do. And then you had media and tech, which you kind of related back to newspapers, which I wasn't really sure newspapers even still existed, so I'm not sure what that business is. But and then you have banks, which, to Rex's point, has a high degree of interaction. I like them to solve problems. But I mean, I can't imagine they can do much of this, like let the machines run for trying to solve my issues. I don't know.
So look, the key aspect, that's where the goals and guardrails framework comes into place, right? So the way we have designed, again, coming back to Auxia, the way we have designed the system is that your guardrails can be very, very, very specific. And a lot of what we do during the early stages is actually working with marketers to tell them that, hey, you got to, like, if you want, you can make it as restrictive, but then you end back with a rules-based system. Because so how do you kind of put the right guardrails in place without constricting the system so that it has no room to improvise, learn, right? Helping them define those early use cases. And by the way, this is a common thread I see across the peer set of AI companies, is that even from a go-to-market perspective, now I'm kind of slightly shifting gears on how companies like us market and go about like building relationships. You have to over-invest in what we call solution strategy, right? So we are seeing that a lot of the effort that we put in is not so much in the classic sales customer support, but in that early onboarding phase. It's much more of a consultative process. We do need to kind of over-invest in educating the teams to make this shift. And the kind of people we hire is also reflective of that.
Yeah, and I know we're getting towards the end of the show here. I do think what you've hit on is sort of a really important for the listeners to think about. This is not a rules-based world that we're going into. And it's almost like we have to think of the AI agents as employees, and we have to be empowering the employees to make, just like that's happened in retail where you've empowered the frontline decision makers to make decisions. We have to begin to build that trust and that confidence in the AI agents to make the right calls. And to your point, at the beginning of the show, you need explainable AI so that you can validate that they are working with it, and some guardrails to make sure that they don't do something totally, off plan that would damage the business. The challenge, of course, is that the AI is close to being at that point of trustworthiness. For those that haven't read the paper about Anthropic running its own vending machine business, it did 4 times better than people most of the time, but 1% of the time, it did really, really worse, including calling the FBI on people that it thought was trying to rip off itself of a $2 vending item.
And I was just going to stay away from 6-fingered people, Rex. That's all I was focused on, just if we can sort of prevent that. Given I still have that appear every once in a while, as we saw just the last few weeks' board meeting. So
well, it's definitely going to be an exciting time. And I know I'll take us out of the show here, but Sandeep, thank you so much for joining us today. That's it for this episode of Decoding AI for Marketing. I'm Rex Briggs.
I'm Greg Stewart.
Be sure to catch all our episodes, plus subscribe, follow, rate, and review in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Or check out us on YouTube. You can get transcripts and more information on the website decodingaiformarketing.com.
And to learn more about MMA or membership options or even the event, Rex, that we just attended last week, the CEO CMO Summit. And by the way, Rex, I haven't told anybody, 84% Net Promoter Score. Go check out MMAglobal.com. Thanks for listening, everybody. Thank you, Sandeep. Appreciate you being here.